Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Bryan Cordova. Bryan is an artist based in New York with a background in architecture. At his young age, he has traveled over 40 countries where he has created beautiful art. Bryan, we are very excited to having you tonight. Welcome. We can wait to hear more about you.
Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm happy to join. Hannah was very kind to reach out to me, I think about 2 months ago, or
Yes.
yeah, a couple weeks ago, where she invited me to do like a guest feature presentation for the urban sketching group you guys have created here in Jacksonville. So I'm really happy to be here and yeah, happy to share a bit about my background, having worked in the architecture field, having studied architecture, and then kind of developing, and still in the process of developing my career as a independent artist. So I guess to begin, I guess the best way to give a short introduction about myself would be, I prepared a small slideshow presentation. Okay, so let me go into full screen mode over here. Perfect. So later in this presentation, I wanted to do a drawing demonstration. Coming or having grown up in New York for most of my life, I think many people are familiar with, at least have seen images of New York City. The image I wanted to start off with the slideshow is one of a project I'm currently working on in Brooklyn. This one specifically is of the Manhattan Bridge. Oftentimes people tend to confuse it with the Brooklyn Bridge, which I think is arguably more popular and famous, but one of the, especially in recent years, in the last, I would say 10, 20 years, this place specifically in Dumbo, the neighborhood, has gotten so much attention specifically because of its, I guess, Instagrammable and most like photogenic spot. It kind of has that, holds its reputation. So later in the presentation, I'll be doing, yeah, going over kind of like my approach to how I've been able to develop my perspective skill drawing, starting from a much, yeah, simplified, much more simple kind of quicker sketches to, yeah, creating now work like this, which tends to be much larger, usually drawn on site and much more detailed and precise than, let's say, things I have in my sketchbook, which I'll be sharing as well later in the presentation. So when I was putting together this presentation, I was going through some old photos to kind of, I guess, introduce myself and give some context to my background. So some of the images you guys might see on this slide, at least on this slide, might, I guess, resonate with you guys. Being an urban sketcher, I've found myself in some of the most quirkiest situations going, yeah, basically carrying a sketchbook with me and going wherever I can, carrying my notebook, a pen and pencil, whatever it might be, but always looking to find the most, in a way, inspiring spot or the best angle. So these are just kind of a collection of images of during my time when I had studied abroad, in my university career back in 2019. Me and my, so above, top left is an image of myself sketching in person. Below is the kind of the group of students, a group of students, I guess at the time, architecture students, but some of them do kind of continue with their urban sketching practice. But this was kind of my introduction to this entire community, which I wasn't really familiar of even back then, because my background, having studied and worked in architecture, began more as a kind of like an academic obligation when I had chosen, or when I was I had the opportunity to study abroad in Italy in the spring semester of 2019. As you see in this image, that was the kind of my primary introduction to not necessarily creating art, but rather analytical architecture drawings of the places we would go and check out in person. So the idea, my very introduction to observational drawing, I will call, was a part of this course where we would take, yeah, our instructors, usually be 2 or 3, they would show us around typically any of the cathedrals you might see here, the very beautiful theaters, where we would kind of be given about anywhere from as short as 10 minutes to 30 minutes, and essentially drawing not exactly what we see and creating it as a piece of art, but rather looking at it as a like from the lens of an architect. So instead of drawing, let's say, a very detailed perspective drawing like this, my instructors at the time, in this bottom left image, they were looking for more analytical work, more like the floor plans and simple kind of geometric shapes, being able to break down buildings. Yeah, so back to where we were. A bit about myself. So when I had studied architecture, during my 5 years of studying architecture, the class, these kind of representational diagrams were my very first introduction to picking up a pencil. Again, at the time, we were strongly advised to work with pencil rather than pen, like what I specialize in nowadays. Then the idea was to, there's a reason behind that, which I'll go over later. But this was kind of my very first time getting into, picking up a pencil again, and I'm starting to understand the visual context around me, the atmosphere. And I think this is around the same time that I started to fall in love as with just sketching in general. So in the top left is like one of the earliest photos I believe one of my colleagues had taken of me when we were in France. So for maybe any of the architecture fans out there, this is actually a very popular building from this architect called Le Corbusier. And during that time, as students, we would go around, I would carry around the sketchbook and create these kind of perspective drawings. Most of the time, there were 4 courses because my instructors would take us to like these very popular cities around Europe, and we would be drawing or creating these diagrams on location. But fast forward 3-4 years later, on the right-hand side is a picture of me recently coming from this past summer, doing a few traveling around Europe for a few more weeks. I was able to go back, but with a different intention. Now that I've kind of finished my academic coursework and I've kind of been developing that habit of drawing almost every day for the past 2 years, I've gotten to a point where, I no longer create drawings that, let's say, are simple and like just these like cute kind of like geometric shapes. More now, the work I specialize in is a lot more, I take on projects that are much larger and much more detailed. So instead of the simple 10-20 minute sketches, now the work I specialize in takes anywhere between anywhere from 1 hour to even as most as 20 to 40 hours, sometimes on some very detailed work. But that's actually another point I wanted to bring off in this presentation, is that, having been able to graduate from university, work in an architecture office for a bit, and continuing to communicate my ideas as an architect and also as an artist, I've been able to, I'd say, develop a skill set, or be able to, I guess better said, manage my time with understanding, okay, how long realistically do I have in a place, whether I'm traveling for leisure or if I'm traveling for work. These are kind of like, at least this slide is a depiction of my quicker kind of sketches that I would make more out of pleasure. So instead of creating large drawings like you see on the bottom right, which could take a couple hours, sometimes I would just bring a sketchbook with me and create these very quick mock-up sketches within anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours. And this kind of body of work is something that's really appealing for me. It's something, since I've been traveling around quite a lot post-graduation, I've been able to, kind of keep that habit with me of like carrying a sketchbook. So for the most part, some of the sketches you see here, they are still usually within the under 2-3 hour framework. But when it comes to my larger body of work, what I'm trying to do nowadays as an architecture artist is develop a body of work that is actually, way more inclusive, not just in the drawing size, but in the amount of detail and attention I want to kind of bring to focus on some things. So this last slide is more of an example of some of the recent work I've done this year versus, when I actually started 2 years ago with perspective drawing, especially. This drawing you see here is one of the earliest ones I started to make, after my studies as well. This was just completely out of, it was around like a postcard size paper. So when I was traveling in Barcelona, the background is where you see now. 2 years later, I was able to return earlier this year and recreate this same sketch, but in a much blown up, larger version, as you see at this right-hand side. So I like to make this distinguish. I like to distinguish between the two different styles because I think it's valuable to see like, okay, how much, depending on the person and the instructor, I think as well, many times, what we're trying to share as artists, it doesn't even have to be to a student or to just sharing it with the public. I think it's important to be realistic and share, okay, what's achievable within a certain time frame, within your skill level, within the amount of time you have. So this is, yeah, some body of work that I've been able to develop. But you know, whenever I'm drawing in person, like on the streets, as you see at this right-hand side, there's usually many people who come up to me and talk about like, oh, how do you even begin to draw something like this? And again, coming from New York, I think, and having a background or especially specializing nowadays in like perspective drawing, especially, I think that would be a nice segue into, yeah, into giving a demonstration of, you know, how did I develop, you know, from doing simpler sketches like this, which would take anywhere from 20 minutes, 30 minutes to developing something that, you know, keeping up with the practice and looking to improve with every single drawing I would make to develop something that is more cohesive and much more, I would even call like long lasting versus like the kind of sketches that I would make that I would sell as I would travel and go. But those are kind of more, that's kind of like a past chapter now that I've finished my studies, starting out with this and moved on to finding what works for me, not just as a artist, as an architect, but also as a now business owner. And I could give, I'll stop sharing screen. Let's see right here. Yeah, so that I guess I brought my travel sketchbook with me. So again, this is kind of like more of a playful exploration rather than that kind of detailed black and white work you see. I still like to do this out of leisure many times without, you know, having to think about, oh, how am I going to record this process and upload and share it to social media, or how am I going to market this either in the digital world or in the in-person world. So much of the sketches you see here, this is a developing style as well that, you know, from the places I've been to around Europe, around parts of Asia, parts of South America, parts of even North Africa as well. These are just kind of like the quicker versions of, you know, what I would do. And recently, actually, I came across the style of another artist I follow online. You guys may be familiar with her. Her name is Dina Brodsky, I believe. Dina space Brod, Brodsky, I believe it is. But I saw one of her sketchbook tours. She gave a sketchbook tour highlighting kind of like a couple images she would share in her sketchbook. And I think one of the beautiful things in that time I saw was how she was able to combine, let's say, her travels with her sketches as well. So this is, again, from a sketchbook I've been working on from the beginning of this year, combining not just you know, the architecture, the things I would see, but also incorporating a additional layer, which is kind of like one of the reasons why I love urban sketching in the first place is because of all the people I get to interact with. So the writings I would put, the notes or whatever, whenever I would travel, I've continued to keep that habit up. And yeah, just kind of write down anything, what I was going through that day, who I met, the
Bryan,
people. Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Could you make me host again so I can control and help you with the highlighting your sketchbook?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Make host. Yeah.
Thank you. And now we focus on your sketchbook, and maybe can you show the previous picture?
Yeah.
Sketch. Thank you.
Yeah. So these are a couple of the sketches I was mentioning before. This is quite a portable size versus like the larger work I have, which most of the time stays in like in the studio I have around where I'm based in New York. So whenever I'm on the go, I tend to bring this with me just because I found it a really great way to explore new places and not only just like, you know, snap pictures and, maybe one day look back at them, but have something that's much more tangible in a way that kind of also speaks a lot deeper, not just to my body of work, but to who I am as a person and the things I'm kind of learning along the way. So most of the
Bryan,
time
can
the
I ask
drawing,
you a question?
yeah, feel free.
What kind of a sketchbook is that?
So this specifically is it's from the brand Strathmore. The paper you see here, it has a beige tint to it. So they're about, I want to say 200 GSM each page. And one of the things I really liked, apart from what I was showing in the presentation earlier, was instead of doing buying a black and white sketchbook, I really started to fall in love with working with like a colored background, a tinted beige background, as you see here. Because what I find oftentimes, let's say if I'm not drawing architecture or if I just want to kind of explore something, a different medium, what I really like is that by having a colored background, I'm able to kind of push and pull the different values of, let's say, a painting like this. So instead of it being, being a white background, I get to add kind of like these highlights, which I think give a much greater and elegant pop to the work.
Looks like it takes ink really well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Like most of the writing you see is on usually different kinds of pens, anywhere from a fine point 0.05 to a 0.1. This is a Strathmore notebook, but typically what I'm doing, I'm working with usually between 2 and 3 pens I cycle between. So my very first drawings began with this brand, Muji, with a 0.38 fine tip pen. And then over time, I started to try out different brands. And I think one of the my most like go-to tools tends to be this one, at least for when it comes to writing and doing sketching architecture, which is the Stadler 0.05. It picks it up very well. And times when I want to kind of darken the ink, let's say in certain moments, I'll start to transfer over and use this one. It's a Copic multi-liner. So these kind of fine points is what I find, the best tools I have to kind of, get the look I'm kind of working to, or a cohesive sketchbook that kind of like comes together, not just with my writing, but something that complements the background, the art itself as well. And most of these sketchbooks, they're able to, this brand at least, I've tend to like quite a lot because it picks up watercolor as well, and like washed down acrylic paint as well. So again, I think with this kind of darker shade background, there's a more beautiful contrast versus, the earlier work I did, which was, just black ink on a white background, and maybe I would add some color. I think sometimes these have a different life like on their own. And many times like these kind of works you see here, it doesn't always have to be architecture related. Sometimes when I'm traveling to many places, I just kind of like to keep small souvenirs of like photos of people I've been with, or simple things. Like sometimes they are architecture, sometimes they're also unfinished sketches, because realistically I don't always have the most amount of time to just, neither whether I'm with somebody or I'm on the go. Most of these sketches tend to be, for the most part, just kind of whimsical. There's not much planning behind it. It's more like I'm in a place and I want to capture a moment as best as I can. So, but I would say because of the, keeping this habit alive of going to all the places I would travel to as a student and post-studies in my work office environment as well, this has been one of the best ways I found to communicate my ideas typically. So sometimes, like I said, they're very playful, quicker sketches, caricatures, or sometimes just certain moments that speak to me, whether I want to have, depending on how I want to display that, whether it's through visual text or through like a collage of things or through moments of color. I think it's an awesome way to, just kind of, it's a nice way to keep building up your skill set and confidence as well. So with that, self-portraits, which, when it comes to actually drawing and stuff, I actually like to share or recognize like what I would say I have a much higher skill set and confidence in versus things like, portraits and stuff has never been my strongest suit. But when it comes to buildings and architecture, I think that's something I definitely love to, work on, because I've devoted so much time and energy into it. I have a much better understanding with it. I'm starting to explore more painting these days, but you know, for me to have been able to get to this point, it really just began with, yeah, simple, like I showed in the presentation, simple thumbnail sketches. So whether it was perspective drawing or, you know, looking at facade and trying to analyze and understand the ratios between certain proportions, that is essentially the foundation I have to have been able to get to the body of work I have today. And I guess with that would be a nice way to, yeah, segue into the drawing demonstration I mentioned before with, I believe Hannah was able to share the image of the Manhattan Bridge with you guys over on the Facebook page, or if not, Instagram
Yes,
page.
we did.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions beforehand, I'd be happy to answer them. Before getting into this, it's going to take around, I'd say I'll do about like a 10-minute demonstration of like the quicker thumbnail sketches, and then about like a half-hour drawing demonstration. But I'm happy to answer any questions people might have before that. We can proceed with the demonstration. What I told the urban sketching group, we had like a meeting beforehand. I advised if you know you do want to join along in this demonstration, I'll be doing a 4-step series of how I kind of have been able to develop my perspective drawing practice and transition into creating a more polished piece. So it's going to start with smaller thumbnail sketches into like a more, this paper measures 8x10. So anything around this paper size should be a good exercise to work with. And let's see. So back to the tools I use. For this, I'll be working with the Staedtler. Yeah, it's a German brand, the 0.05 fine point pen. And let's see, I guess we can start. Yeah, I'll be using the image for reference. Typically, I work in person. I find it usually a really good practice to develop, especially working in pen and from observation. I think it's a lot more of a powerful feeling to get an idea of yeah, how the space works between, you know, at least that's how I like to look at it when it comes to perspective drawing. When you're in person, I think it gives much greater context to understand, okay, the spatial relations between, let's say, how far this building is set back versus how close, let's say, this person is, or this other kind of figure in the foreground is to my relative standing point. Whenever I'm working from photos, I think those tend to kind of flatten the image a bit. So it kind of, in a way, it's a good way to practice for sure, especially if somebody is still like starting to develop or get into drawing and painting. It's nice to kind of have that confidence at home before sharing it with the public. But what I typically tend to do, because I think the image I'll be working with today is simpler geometry. It's not as complex of a perspective. There's lots of details, don't get me wrong, but I think with this specific image we're working with, the way I'll be introducing and describing it is in kind of, yeah, 4-step simplified approach. So I'll grab this image right now. And let me just bring my camera a bit closer so you can see the sketches. I think that should be an appropriate height. Yeah. Okay, great. So I have the image pulled up to me. Like I said, before we move on to this 8x10 paper, we'll be working with these smaller thumbnail sketches. So for this part, I would advise just following along to the screen you see, and then when we move on to this piece of paper, we can kind of work as we go together. Yeah. So yeah, being from New York, like as I mentioned before, living very close to the city within like an hour's reach by train, by car. The bridge I wanted to focus on today is, yeah, probably one of the most iconic ones of, I'd say, yeah, that you can find around the US and around the world as well. So when it comes to drawing the Manhattan Bridge, as you see, let's say here, the way I like to approach drawing perspectives like this is by breaking it down into, or introducing the concept of the horizon line. So like I was introduced in my architectural studies, one of the earliest concepts we were taught was to kind of understand where the horizon is, meaning like our eye level is relative to the rest of the drawing. So if we were to look at the image that we're using for reference today, you can see a silhouette of a person at the bottom left corner. Generally speaking, if we're trying to think of like composition of a page, we want to be able to have enough information. So it's not just the bridge, but some context, some of the adjacent buildings, because that's really going to reinforce the perspective, increase the intensity that we feel from it. So with that, what I tend to do is if I have a blank page like this, I tend to start with just one figure. Let's draw a circle as a head right here. And let's say this person is 6 foot. So this is the kind of base work I have of understanding, okay, where is everything going to be in relation to this? So based on this person's standing perspective, the horizon line, as I was taught in architecture school, is basically your eye level. If you were to divide, whatever you're looking at into two, I don't know, maybe it's a bottom third versus like a 2/3 sky. If you were to just draw a line from your eye level across the page, this is going to be kind of the point of reference you use for how big you want to draw the context, the buildings around you. So once I have the horizon line in place, with the Manhattan Bridge, another thing I like to, at least my general drawing approach with any sketches, I like to begin in the center. So based on how big I want my person to be, my main figure, I'll kind of dictate that, use that to dictate how large I want to make my center. Let's say the bridge, breaking it down into not the complex building you see standing today, but just in the very simple figure, analytical drawings. I want to kind of break it down into looking at the bridge as like a simple it's some very small thin rectangular box. The idea is to have something work from the center of the page and use that to kind of influence everything that goes around. So once I have, let's say, a simple figure of a simple silhouette of what the bridge might look like relative to this person, I'm going to start to put other people in to kind of get an idea of, okay, how do I want to play around with this? So if I want somebody further back in the drawing, I'll make them smaller, as you see here. But if I want somebody very, very close up, let's say somebody is taking a selfie with their phone right here. So if I want to highlight that detail, the way I approach it is by bringing the figure much closer or much more apparent into the foreground. So I'll draw their head bigger, their body's much more bigger relative to the center point I'd established here. So once you have that kind of general understanding of the horizon line, you can use these to kind of, influence and slowly start to build up what the next information you want to add to the drawing would be. So working with this, let's say I have, let's say a person here, there's my eye level, another person here on the left. If I want to put somebody really in the far background and more in the center of the drawing at a very small scale, it's right there. And if I want somebody larger, again, I'll put them in the top right or bring them much closer to the foreground. Once I have, let's say, that simple silhouette of my center focus, so for this case, that's the bridge, I'll start to work on the second concept that I learned in school, which is the vanishing point. So the idea behind perspective drawing is you want to have every leading line to a page finish at one point. So if I was to mark this point with a red pen, just to understand like the concept a bit further, if I was to call this my vanishing point, meaning if I were to have like a building, let's say right here, as we see in the drawing, I want every, like, let's say if I were to take the silhouette of this building, I want every line to basically finish right there. So referencing the image again, I see on the right of the bridge, you have this kind of like multi-level building. So it starts at one height, and then if I'm working up, this is a bit taller in comparison to the bridge we see here at the center. So when I start to draw in or emphasize that perspective, focusing on, basically referencing this point, this red dot, by adding these leading lines. So this is really, I think, the bread and butter of everything. These two concepts, the horizon line and understanding your vanishing point and where all your lines will finish relative to the rest of the page, is the general approach to understanding like the basics for 1-point perspective drawing. So if I were to finish or continue working on this one, I reference my image. I have a building to the left of me. Let's say, so if this was the bridge right here, I have this building that stops a bit before the highest point, so right here. And I see that it's at like a similar angle kind of to these. So I kind of want to use that reference point as well. It helps sometimes to draw a dotted line, or if you can just, because it's a smaller page, you can kind of just reference it with like hand motions. The lines I'm going to be drawing, I'm going to bold them for now, just to, make it easier to understand in this diagram. But that's the general idea. So everything above the horizon line, as you see it dotted here, is going to finish at this one vanishing point. When I think about, okay, now if I'm thinking about compositionally, how am I going to build this up? You have to think that, okay, there's not just lines that are going to finish from above your eye level, but also from below. So the lines from below, usually the higher and higher you get. So if I were to use my pen right now to show the angles of these lines, they tend to be more and more angled the higher and higher up you go. So if I had like a skyrise building, it would go off the page and it would probably be falling down at like a more vertical angle. But if I'm working, referencing my horizon line, the drawings, the lines I'm going to be placing below their horizon line are going to be much less angled. So let's say if this building height comes here, I only want it to be, it's going to be closer to a horizon line versus like a very angled vertical line. So again, I have my ground floor somewhere around here, a bit lower than that red dot. And then I have the kind of where the building finishes down here and to the left. So once you have these two ideas in play, it's kind of like a sequential thing. So I'm going to start to work on the third thumbnail sketch where it's the same concept. So I'll take down, using the past thumbnail sketches, I'll kind of use this as reference to get my center image, get my center building in focus. So kind of drawing that silhouette in again. Now that I have an idea of where my horizon is, about, let's say 1/4 or 1/3 of the page, it's gonna come down over here, here. I'll have my people added into the drawing. This one's gonna be further or much closer. One's gonna be further back. Let's do another one with, let's say they're a couple, so they're two people together. So once I have this in, referencing the leading lines I was referencing before, the buildings which finish at your vanishing point, it's the same process. So I'm gonna kind of add the remaining context here as we did in the number 2 sketch. So bring these lines. I'm not going to bold them so much in this drawing because it's the same process we had here. But the idea is to, like, once you have the essential information on the page, the relative height, the ground level, the floor plan, your center image, this is where, the rest, you start to kind of fill in these shapes slowly, bit by bit. So now that I have, if I were to reference my photo again, I can see that the building on the left has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 levels, building heights at least. So as I continue to combine like the horizon line and vanishing points, I want to start to introduce more information. This is going to emphasize the kind of perspective effect I have. So knowing that there's going to be 6 levels on this building to the left, I'm going to create about just small markers right here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Kind of 6 points where I kind of want to have the line I draw that's going to finish here and extend that out. So if I'm taking that vanishing point again, I'm going to start to, you don't have to draw the dotted lines on everything, but I think it helps when you're first getting used to it. But I'm going to essentially be pulling from the center point. I'm always going to be referencing and bringing these lines out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and for the building height that's closest to the ground floor, this one's going to be a bit lower. So it's going to be closer to a horizontal line versus having this angled line. So doing that same concept, I'm going to look at the building to the right, the Manhattan Bridge, and I see that there's about, let's say, 5 or 6 building levels on the smaller building. So I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 markers. And then from there, I'm going to, start from the center, and I'm going to kind of like motion my hand in a way that follows every point I see from here. And I see on the building to the right of this, it's about 6 or 7 story building. So again, I'm going to put my points of reference here. Most of the time, if I want to kind of continue with these perspective lines, I can simply just extend the line onto the page. Since we already have this angled to finish at the vanishing point, the idea behind perspective drawing is that every line should kind of like, especially for 1-point perspective, every line should be cohesive. Everything should fall, let's say, parallel. If you want to increase how much information you want to include in the page, then just branch out. So there's about 7 stories here. So instead of having to put markers everywhere, I'm just gonna add another floor up here and then continue the lines that stopped at the smaller building to our left. So once I have that done, I'm gonna recreate it one last time. So again, with the horizon line over here, center object in focus. And then I'm gonna put my essential information in. So let's start with the people. Person here, and then I'll start to introduce the context again. So the building to the left is going to be a bit lower than here, vanishing point, ground level, and again, the lines are going to be angled in a way that it falls directly at the center. The one below their horizon line is going to be more horizontal. The buildings to the right that are much taller are going to be more angled, more vertical. So this is just really like an introduction to like how, when I was first learning how to draw perspectives, this is everything my instructors had taught me. And being able to, just do this out of a hobby and then leisure everywhere I would go, I started to really develop an eye to, no longer really need to have the same step-by-step process, but rather just having all these tools or understanding these concepts and bringing it onto a page is what a skill I think each artist can develop at their own pace. But I think perspective drawing is definitely a difficult concept. Whenever I'm drawing in person, people tend to be quite surprised or they don't know how to begin, like with how to do this. So I get this is how I was introduced to this and how I kind of continue to approach my practice, always working usually top down or from the center out onto the page. So from here out. Right now in this forest thumbnail sketch, I like to call this part like the filling in phase, where now that I have an idea of like, okay, where each building is going to be, how many stories more or less the buildings are, now it's just a matter of just repeating the same process over again. But in this page, now that I have all the essential information, I'm going to start to add more information. So when it comes to perspective drawing, again, in this thumbnail, you have one of the important concepts is to understand the intensity of the line work that goes on behind the drawing. So as I mentioned, with people, the smaller they are, pushed into the background, that kind of gives a greater illusion of, okay, how far I'm standing from, let's say, the rest of this bridge right here. The buildings that are furthest away from me, this point like right here, which is furthest away from me, the lines, so this is adding more context, the columns that you can see in the photo, the lines tend to crowd up, or they're a lot more dense and compact the further away you go. And the closer you come to your eye level, it's like, the scale figures we added, it's going to be more apparent. There's going to be more space out here. So again, if I'm working on the buildings to the left and right, the drawings, the buildings are going to be much more condensed and compact. And as I zoom out more and more, it's going to get more like grid-like in a way. It's kind of thinking of it like a grid. It's going to be skewed in a way that, there are some really intense moments of line work, and then there's like more relief the further away you get from it. So now that I have the essential information on the page, the only thing that's left is really just, working out those details. So once I have all the context here, let's say I want to thicken up this line just to kind of emphasize that perspective, thickening up the roof lines. If I want to, start to kind of get a better idea of what this building might look like relative to everything else, I'll start to add more context. So the bridge right here is more or less divided in half. So from everything you see above and everything you see below, this is going to give you, relative to a person's standing height, it's going to give the viewer, the person, or even the artist like creating this art piece, you're going to have a better sense of space, knowing that everything further away is going to kind of be more condensed. So if I want to start to detail this, I don't have to go too crazy. And I think this is the great thing about doing thumbnail sketches or small sketches. You don't have to be so detailed and precise, because most of the time at this scale, you're not going to pick up so much of the, you're not going to have to focus on being so precise, because the smaller it is, the less information technically you have to put onto a page. So right now I'm just adding some simple figures of or filling in some of the building as you see here. So again, for the next drawing, where I'd invite you guys to join and participate, this is taking all the concepts you see here and basically just bringing it all together in one and learning as you go in the process. Many times, let's say, if in this last thumbnail sketch, the bridge I made was too short, let's say it finished right here, easily I can just kind of continue to work up the drawing by extending the lines. Most of the time, I advise people to work in pen rather than pencil, because I think it's a quicker streamlining process. And above that, it increases your confidence with each line stroke you're going to place on the page. You become much more intentional and aware of what you're drawing into the figure. So with that, will come the next step, which, bringing it all together in one finished piece. Now that we have these 4 thumbnail sketches here, I'm going to bring my 8x10 piece of paper and repeat the same process. But instead of, let's say, I'll keep this pushed off to the side. There we go. Instead of, doing the same process or smaller on the page, I would just suggest, just use the drawing work at the full scale, even like extending your lines off the page or until like the page gives out. So beginning with the same process, I'm just going to lightly divide this 8x10 paper by, let's say a quarter. So depending on how I hold the pen, it's going to influence, okay, how heavy my lines are relative to, if I want to add darken the value. So these kind of lighter strokes, which I would call construction lines, are what are influencing before you get into drawing more detailed stuff. These initial marks on the page, let's say the horizon line right here, and the building I have at the center. So the bridge right here. Before I start to highlight or detail all this stuff and go crazy, I always think it's essential. It really is essential to just like start off with, you know, what do I need on the page first? So I have my building at the center. I'll start to add the buildings at the side. A line here, a line here. My horizon line is going to be somewhere over here. I'll put a person in the bottom right corner. And yeah, this is the general idea. So as I mentioned before, it's just now taking these 4 steps and combining them all together in one. So now that I have my building here, a simple silhouette, I'm going to start to add like buildings on the side. So again, I'm reinforcing those that vanishing point by doing these leading lines. I'm gonna increase the height, because if I'm looking at my image again, I see that the building on the right part of the building, the smaller one, finishes around the halfway point. So if I want to make a marker just for my own reference here, part of it finishes halfway here, and then the building to the right, further right, is a bit taller. So it's going to have a more of an angled, let's say, line. So again, I'm bringing this all the way to the end of the page just because, yeah, it's good to work larger, work in a way that, you know, you don't feel so restricted to just like a specific canvas. Like if you want to recreate this in a larger thing, great. If you want to work it with it smaller as well, that's great. I think the best thing about working at this size and scale is that, yeah, it's simple enough to yeah, be forgiven for the amount of details you do or do not add. So when I start to add other buildings like this, which finishes about the halfway point of this top part, again, referencing my vanishing point, bringing the lines out here. The reason I'm going full width with the page is to really just increase the intensity of that perspective and focus. So now that I have this here, I'm going to work on the bottom vanishing point lines. So again, I'm going to bring this more or less down here. I see that the ground floor is going to be just a small notch below my horizon line. And then if I reference here, the buildings to the right, again, the horizon, the lines below the horizon line are not going to be that angled as we see above the image. So once I have this information here, I'm going to, start to lightly put some marks on the page. So again, the building on the left has about 5 or 6 stories. We don't have to be super precise with, you know, trying to recreate it to the most like accurate thing as possible. The idea behind this demonstration, and I think drawing or urban sketching in general, is just to recreate something at your comfort and your ability as well. Like if you have the time to invest 10, 20, 30 hours onto a drawing or painting, go for it. If you only have 1 hour, even 10 minutes, you can still create these simple things. And I think that's the beautiful thing about sketching, drawing, and creating any kind of work of art. You kind of, the artist itself has the power to, communicate or focus on what they want to communicate on the most. So with this, okay. With this drawing, I'm still dividing up the floor plates, working on the building to the left right now. I have about 6 levels, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay. Bringing this out here. Referencing the center point. And again. And again. There we go. Now working on the building to the right, I have about 5 levels. 1, 2, 3, 4. I missed one, but you know, I'll see if I can kind of adjust that by drawing a bit above my markers, the marking points. So here's 1 floor level, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It seems like there's like a small basement half floor level at the bottom of this building here. So there's a head I drew earlier on with when I was starting to add the information onto the page. So I'll keep this here. The fun thing about, I think, sketching, doing things like that is that, the person, the people you add, it can kind of start to tell a story. So if I want to, I don't have to do this necessarily now, but if I want to accessorize like the person, I can simply, add like a baseball cap to them. If I want to say they're wearing a shirt, okay, then I'll start to, with this simple silhouette I have, I'll start to outline it more like that. So they kind of look stick figure-ish, but depending on how I want to convey that information, I'll go over it more towards the end. But for starting out with the beginning of a drawing, it's nice to have that reference point. So with the further building to the right now, I have about 7 or 8 levels. It's a bit taller than the one to the left. So I'll mark it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is that half floor plate. And then motioning from the center point and drawing to go all the way to the edge of the paper. And you might notice here that, I'm not working with a ruler. Everything here is very like freehand. It's very much like just organic lines, I like to call them. I'm not, again, when it comes to architecture drafting, how the profession worked like 20, 30 years ago, before digital software as an AutoCAD and Revit, everything was done by hand with T-lines and square rulers and 90 degrees, working around with like these axonometric projections. That's kind of like a forgotten concept, not forgotten, but that's more of a niche concept in the architecture world now. But the reason I don't use the rulers and stuff like that is simply because of whenever I'm sketching is portability. I don't have to bring these like I don't have to bring a big studio desk and all these fancy tools to kind of like create a simple sketch if I'm, and in a way I kind of prefer it like this as well, because it's more, I don't know, it's more loose, it's more playful rather than trying to create something that is exactly what I see. It's my interpretation of what I want to include to a page. So now that I have my added context, I'll start to, let's see, let's kind of detail the center building now. So I'm seeing that the image kind of has that bridge. More or less, it divides the center object, that rectangle we draw at the beginning, kind of divides it in half. And it has about the thickness of 1 story. So I'm just going to keep that in mind. Most of the time with the lines I'm drawing, I can go over them once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. And, it doesn't, I don't think it hurts the drawing process whatsoever. If you make a mistake, if something is too out of proportion, the good thing about working with pen is that, it challenges you to come up with a solution and try to, make this look more accurate. In a way, sometimes more lines on a page actually transmits more information and makes it look more detailed. So now that I have this kind of center building, the bridge divided in half, I'm seeing that, okay, that the bridge is about 1/3 to 1/3. So the referring to the posts or the columns you see at the side of the building. I'm gonna divide that up right now here. And I see that there's like a small, I'll bring these lines up just for ease of reference. So now that I kind of have this in like a, let's say this is Bay A, I have Bay B, which is a bit wider in the Bay A proportion. I'm going to, I think it's more of like a equal distance. So I'm gonna, again, with a simple error, not error, but I'm gonna place another line to where I think, the actual width should be. Now that I have this, I see at the top of the building, working, let's say top down now, there's like a small rectangular, let's call it like a hat. So I'm going to detail this a bit just by adding some lines. I see it breaks out of that kind of rectangular frame we had, which is okay. I'm gonna bring down some of the lines to the side, darken the edges. Once I'm here, right above the halfway point of that building, I see that, let's see, there's like another floor just slightly above. You're not going to see the entire thing, but it is slightly above this bridge here. Once I have this information, I see that there's an arch within the center bay. So kind of give my impression of an arch right there. And I see that there's about, I'll call them X's, the kind of trusses that you see spanning across the horizontally. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these X-shaped trusses. So I'll kind of just add the horizontal line first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And using that information, I'll kind of carry it onto the next page. Or onto the next bay, not page. Give this edge a bit more thickness. And then I'll start to add the trusses in bit by bit. So now that I have the top trusses in place, let's see, I'm going to bring this down. I see at the bottom part of where this bridge gets divided in half, that there is about three trusses at the bottom. So I add some lines here, 1, 2, 3. And again, on the other side, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to finish more or less over here. And I'll add that information onto the page as well. Okay, so kind of, for now, I'm going to leave the center object there as it is and work more on the increasing the intensity of the perspective drawing by returning to the buildings that I find at the side. So as I mentioned before, the buildings furthest away from you are going to have, or where the lines are going to condense and be the most compact. And what I'm doing here, I'm not even counting how many, let's say, columns divide up, the space. I'm going to go by eye and, just add these lines, like giving them a bit more space with each adjacent line I put onto the page. So to add these columns, I'm kind of doing like a double line since that's 1 point. I'm going to be giving them a thickness by doing 1 and then another line. And then spacing it out a bit more. Try 1 more. And yeah, move over to the building to the right. The smaller one is going to have these more condensed lines again. I'm not really counting. I'm just kind of adding vertical stripes to the page to give that idea of like, yes, this point is further away from where I'm standing right now. And then I'll work to the building on the right. So the closer you get to where, let's say, this person is standing, that's when I start to introduce these double lines that kind of get spaced out a bit more, because 1 line is not going to be enough to kind of describe the overall, give greater information to the reader, because the columns, they have a thickness, they have a width, even if they're only 6 inches in real life thickness, it's still something that's worth noting onto the paper. I think it gives more visual context to the art piece. So I got a couple lines on the page here, and I'm not really that happy with how many lines I have here. So I kind of want to go back and between this certain bay, I'm gonna add one more line because I think it's missing something right there. Over it again, and then with that building, just gonna add one last line over here. Okay. So now that I have all this essential information on the page, I'm going to work on the top building heights, the kind of the crown of these buildings, you can call them. So working on the left side of the paper, I see that there is like a kind of like a small angled, rounded angled, I don't even know what you call these in architecture terms, but essentially where the roof line would be. It's the same process. I see that there's like these small rectangular details, and with them, I'm gonna start to add them. Again, instead of just having a simple straight line, I'm gonna start to give it a bit more context by adding these rectangular, let's call them boxes, and spacing them out a bit more the further out I go. It's gonna get more compact the closer I get to the vanishing point. Now that I have some of this, I'll kind of add some thickness to that roof line. It gets a bit out of place here, or it gets a bit squiggly. So I'm gonna try and go back over with another line and try and make it a bit more straighter than the last line I placed. And you'll see the more and more you go over like a certain line, the darker the values get, like automatically. And I think that's a nice added perspective effect to the drawing. With these rectangular prisms, again, I'm not trying to draw every roofline detail to the T. Instead, I'm just kind of gonna do like quick scribbles, quick impressions, but trying to space them out a bit more the further away I get, and crowd it, add more noise to the drawing at the edges. So now that I have this roof line here, I'll work on the roof line to the right. See that this one doesn't have as much details at that roof line. I do see that the smaller building to the right has about, it doesn't have the same crown top you have on the left, but it has like this, like one story is definitely more pronounced than others, like the smaller top portion. And I see like more towards the ground level, there's another more pronounced portion out there. So I'm just kind of thickening up those lines. And then with the taller building to the right, this one does have that kind of crown effect. So again, I'll kind of start to simply squiggle in these like rectangular prisms. Again, spacing them out, making them bigger in size the further away I get from the page. And then bringing it back to the vanishing point by doubling up the lines. Okay, so once I have this information here, I'm going to work on more of the buildings at the side still. But before that, I want to start to add a bit more people to the page to give it a bit more life. So like I mentioned before, referencing the horizon line, I'm going to place some people a bit below the horizon line. Let's say if they were a child, they're not going to have the same 5 foot, 6 foot standing eye level I have. So these varying heights and people you add might make the drawing a bit more interesting. So people, smaller details all the way in the back, and then if someone's closer to the front, I'm going to bring this figure. Again, simple silhouettes, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Let's say the person I just drew in has like a child with them. They're going to be a bit smaller, so below my standing level. Gonna have her hold the hand of the parent, and yeah, there we go. From there, I think the side on the left I'm working with right now is a bit too empty, so I'm gonna add like 1 or 2 more people here. maybe if I want to add some more movement, I can try and make it like they're walking, so maybe space out their legs. Maybe put their arms in diagonal motions to kind of signal movement. Another person to the left. Okay. So typically, on a normal day in New York, you'll find a ton of people taking pictures here. So if anything, I think it's the more people you add, the more, in a way, New York it will feel the drawing. Okay, so now that I have some more people on the page, I kind of want to work on the ground level. So there's sidewalks on each adjacent side of the building. So again, referencing my vanishing point, I have my bottom floor, and I'm going to space this out by moving here to the right. So I'm going to give this about what I would imagine like a 10-foot, 12-foot sidewalk by drawing another line that goes here. And then on the right-hand side, there's a sidewalk that I want to add to the drawing. It gives it more context. Here we go. So now that I have kind of like the street in place, I'm now going to go over any or start to fill in more information onto the page. So I think for this drawing right here, we can start to work and add in the windows. So if you look at the between the double lines and the horizontal angled lines of each story, you kind of have these small like it's like a diagonal rhombus. Like it's not necessarily a square because it's at an angle, but in a projected perspective, it would be a rectangle or a square. So instead of keeping it as like simple thin lines, I'm gonna just add with every other box a thinner rectangle. And this is gonna give the illusion that okay, the buildings to the left or the buildings around here they're not just simple lines. It's they have windows, they have mullions, they have the window edges as well. So by going over these small boxes that in this grid we created, essentially giving more life to the drawing, making it more, giving it a more appropriate scale, I would say. So it's just repeating that same process between the double lines we placed onto the page. I might want to add like a thinner line next to it just to give it a bit more thickness. And then I'll kind of go over and add these skinnier rectangular windows. And because of the lines we already drew from the vanishing point, as long as you stay within this rectangle, like going parallel and perpendicular with this small space you have within this grid, you don't have to start always reference like the vanishing point anymore. You can kind of just really go with with the information you already laid onto a page. And that's why I think it's important to, especially when you're starting out with drawing perspectives or wanting to improve the skill. Once you have that kind of base frame to work with, it's just it's more of a fine lining and smoother process afterwards. You don't have to think so much and try to be precise because you already did most of that hard work at the beginning, the analytical estimating work. Okay, now I'm going in the areas where there's like the more condensed line work. I'm not being so precise because the lines do kind of get a bit lost with the grid I have going on. So instead of trying to, make everything perfect, I'm just gonna, whatever fits onto the page, fits onto the page. I think the idea, like, there are gonna be many moments as you're drawing or sketching whatever you might be doing from a photo from real life where you don't like how it's turning out. But I think when you keep with the drawing and keep kind of detailing it, it starts to convey more, it starts to come together more and more the more time you invest into it. So that's always another piece of advice I like to tell people. Don't just like give up and stop halfway because it looks bad. There are many drawings I've worked on that don't look great. They really look like, I think the proportions are so off, or it's just like I'm not having a great day and I don't think this piece really is working the way I wanted it to do. But what I've learned is that if you just persist with, going through the process, detailing as I'm doing right now, these windows, it's gonna start to make the drawing look more to the level you wanted or you maybe had in mind.
Yeah, I've often told people that if they just turn the page, come back to it another time, they'll have a new frame of mind.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's I think that's a great way, you kind of give your mind a break when, especially when it comes to all these like very close detailed work, you can get a bit lost in the process and you're like, oh wow, where do I pick up again? Sometimes it's better just to, put that sketch away, come back at it like in a later hour, or if not, just like in a few days. As well, I think it gives your mind a good break to kind of come back and figure out, okay, where did I leave off and how can I continue to build this up? Okay, so I'm finishing up almost with the buildings I have to the side, just adding these windows and frames in. There's probably one or two extra stories that shouldn't actually be there, but again, I think for the purpose of this demonstration and this sketch, like I don't think that there's anything wrong in that. Like even if it's not the most accurate, another thing I like to tell people is like most people can't pick up on your mistakes. It's usually only the artist who tends to be the harshest on herself if they're not satisfied with like a certain moment. But for the general public, especially people who maybe don't have a background in art or architecture, it's just, yeah, it still looks amazing to most people's eyes. So that's the effect we want to go for, just not being so hard on ourselves about the details and precision work. So now that I have the buildings to the side, I'm going to start to detail a bit further in, like the bridge. So this is another perspective trick, I guess you can call here, because the bridge itself is at an angle. The point that I'm going to start from the left here, the lines are going to be much more condensed, kind of like we were doing at the side of the buildings. So I'm just adding some lines that, slowly start to get more spaced out, because the bridge, as it comes out to the right, it's closer to our eye level. So from there, just adding these diagonal trusses. Going back over some lines. And say for the bottom half of that bridge, I see some like horizontal lines or lines at a different angle. So I'm not going to be too precise. I'm just kind of sketch them in, not at a parallel with the horizontal part of the page, but kind of do it at an angle because that's what I see it as well, or perceive it as. And I'm going to kind of make them get more and more condensed the quicker, the more to the left I go. Darken up a few areas. And then I'm going to work. So I think for right now, that bridge part looks okay. I'm going to work on the corona of the Manhattan Bridge now. So I see that it should probably be a bit taller, this top part. So I'm just going to add another line And then from here, I will continue to fill in any details I see. I see that there's like two smaller braces, trusses at the top part. This one has 3 in the center bay. And then another 2 on the right. And then with the kind of columns we like sketched out of the bridge, I see that there's using the same vertical lines. I'm just gonna kind of extend that and like a small circle, because this is the part of the roof line of that bridge. Again, not being so precise and trying to make it look perfect, just getting the essential information out there. I'm pretty content with that. I just wanted to darken some of the posts we had drawn before to kind of, in a way, I'm like bolding right now some of the line work just to make it pop out. And you'll see that as you start to add more lines, make things a bit more bolder, there's more white space, there's darker lines, higher contrast in some areas as well. I think it all kind of complements the drawing together at the end. So from here, I'll work top down. So kind of wrapping up now with this drawing. This is more of the smaller parts where now I can kind of draw like just again, just doing this to my freehand, estimating where I see these bridge cables fall. I see that this third one kind of cuts between the central bay and then comes out here. And I see another one that gets a bit close, repeats that. And then on the right, let's see this. These are kind of more compact, so it looks like they're all kind of merging together. So kind of connect that to the top point. And then this like kind of smooth, curvy, horizontal motion with my hand. Go over some of the cable lines again, give them a bit more of the thickness. If one looks a bit odd, I'm just gonna like kind of adjust that as I can go. And usually the more information you add to the page, it starts to guide it's okay to kind of go back over the sketch 1, 2, 3 more times. Areas that might be a bit out of proportion. So now I have that top. I see that there's smaller cable lines that run vertically. So for this part, I don't want to crowd the drawing too much. So I'm just going to kind of lightly add single lines that kind of run vertically down from the cable. I see that happens at the center as well. Add some more on the right hand side. And yeah, more or less, that's the general idea. The only thing I would say that's missing to here is adding some of the background. So yeah, I think one of the coolest things about this specific point of view is that you kind of get to see the Empire State Building very nicely framed. I actually missed an arch at the bottom bay. So add that now. You see the Empire State Building, which I'll kind of just sketch in as it's kind of along the same lines of where our vanishing point is. I'm just gonna do a simple silhouette. It doesn't have to be anything crazy because it's so far away from our standing perspective. You can kind of get away with just like, adding a few lines, and that's enough for the purpose of this sketch. See that there's some rectangular buildings, so I'll kind of add just some boxes. Again, nothing, I'm not even going to detail them. I wanted to give a light impression of like, okay, that, there's not just a plain white background. There is some smaller details going on behind this. Okay, and then that's about it. Yeah. So the last part, now that we have this, the entire idea is there. There are areas where you can kind of like, increase that intensity. And one of them I'll go over right now. It's working specifically with the ground floor. So you see how it's kind of like bare white, the same color as the sky. One of my best suggestions when it comes to this is to work on the ground a bit or make it look so it's different from the sky. Most of the time, most of my work, I don't touch the sky or color it often. I just kind of leave it white and let the building or the drawing speak for itself. In this case, one way to do that is to kind of increase or add more context to the page. So I see that there's like driving lane. So I'm gonna add kind of like an extension of the height of the sidewalks we already had. So again, I'm just gonna add these for like light marks. And then from here, I'm gonna do, instead of working vertically as we did, emphasizing the heights with this entire drawing, I'm gonna work horizontally, kind of like etching the ground in this left to right motion. So it's the same concept where, working from the top and then going to the bottom, I'm going to space the lines out bit by bit more. So the closer I get to the people, the more I'm spacing out the lines. And this is to give a general idea of, let's say, what the bricks might look like, or it just makes it look so it's more of a complete drawing instead of just like empty white space. I see that the other lanes we added, it has like a different brick texture. So instead of spacing them out so much, I'm gonna keep these lines a bit tighter. But the same concept is still there, even though I'm not drawing as many lines as I did at the center bay, I want to still emphasize that this is a different texture than this brick is different from the cobblestone, let's say, we find here. So how do I do that? Just by placing some double lines closer to each other and letting it finish kind of at the end. It can almost become just like one solid black line, like all the way at the end. And these like moments of contrast, I think, are what give more power to the drawing. Okay. That's about it. And let's say if I want to go over, bring out some of the people as well. You can do whatever you like with the people if you want to kind of bold them or start to tell a story more. Like I said, maybe this guy at the front I want to add, like make it show that he's taking a picture to make it more recognizable that like, yeah, most people here, they're coming for like their quick like Instagram pictures or just like fun, quick memories with family and friends. I think it's an awesome area. So I kind of like angled his arm here, giving him a t-shirt. Maybe adding like a New York hat. So again, there's smaller details. This is more of like the playful side of just adding your own spin to it. I drew a child before. Maybe I want to give them a backpack. Maybe a person has headphones on the left right here, holding out their silhouette. This person is kind of walking in motion, angling their limbs, their legs and arms. And if there's anything else I want to draw, this is just like additional detail work. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I think, yeah, it's enough to get an idea of, yeah, at least how I've been able to approach and use this approach and develop the style of work I work on now. I think just one last detail I want to add to here, just to change the scene up a bit. See that there's like a one-way stop sign in this photo. So even though it's a bit further back or a bit closer than what this photo is referencing it, I'm going to bring it more towards the front. So kind of adding like a line and then like a horizontal bar. I want to write one way. Just small details. I think this is like this usually tends to be my most favorite part, like just being able to add whatever details I want. And I think this is what makes each sketch and drawing unique in a way. Doing something that, I could, if I wanted to, just take a photo and draw over this or trace it, but I don't think I'll have the same effect as like, the movement and the lines you see over here. So there's a stop sign right here. I'd say that's about it. Yeah. Again, there could be more details added to the drawing. If you want to go over, add a different crosshatch to the pavement we added originally. Maybe with the rectangular windows we added to the side, we can add small crosses. So it kind of gives that idea like, okay, there's more going on. There's like mullions and like, you know, horizontal window dividers that like kind of again re-emphasize the scale and the perspective drawing. I think this gives like a nice added effect. And this part tends to be quicker because you already have most of the information on the page. It's just a matter of emphasizing these elements. Yeah.
It looks great.
Thank you.
They're very nice. That was wonderful. Now, if it's okay with everyone, we can check and see their sketches, everyone's sketches.
Yeah, I'd love to see how other people approach this as well.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Let's see.
Nice.
Let's see.
It's not very fast.
I can spotlight. First, let's go with Jessica.
Oh, Jeff.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Nice.
Very.
Awesome.
I really love the shadows you added there. I think that's a really great effect. That's nice.
Thank you. We don't hear you, Jess. Now, let's go with Luann.
Oh, nice, Luann.
That's awesome. Nice,
Amazing.
nice. Yeah. I like the details in this one too. I like how there's like shadows with like the people. So yeah, you have your own kind of white space and dark, like negative space approach to it too. That's awesome.
Thank you. Let's see. Luisa.
It just Luisa. Okay.
Amazing.
Very nice.
Nice. I see the small child at the center too. Good touch.
Very nice. Now, Lisa. Now let's go with Lisa.
I'm just not fast enough.
It's great still.
Very nice.
I like it. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Wes. We'll go with Wes.
Oh,
Nice.
Wes.
Oh
Amazing.
my gosh. Very nice.
Awesome.
You're killing
Is this
me.
I appreciate the thank you note as well. That's awesome.
Very nice.
Great job. Was this a watercolor brush you used?
No,
kind of-
Copic.
Okay. Ah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a nice way to add like another layer of detail
Yeah.
to a drawing.
Now, Patrick. Let me go spot Patrick.
All right.
Awesome. Nice. Oh, and I like the cloud effect you added too. Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, see how
Absolutely.
like I mentioned before, every artist can add their own spin to it. On some of the drawings people were sharing before, some of them only had people. This one has cars and sky as well. The other one before from Wes had like more of a shading approach. So it's nice to see other people's like interpretation. And I think that's the awesome thing about creating art with other like-minded people. It's just you see how other people approach.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. Now, who else is Ruth? Let's go with Ruth.
All right.
Wow, there's a
That's
party
nice.
going on there.
Wow.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah,
That's
this
busy.
definitely looks like New York. I see
Wow.
the
At the
Nice.
people.
Yeah, it's
You're
the
me-
people honestly, yeah. I think it's always because I think my approach to drawing architecture is like, okay, the building's, let's say, hopefully going to be there for a long time, can always reference it, but the people you see at that moment, sometimes it's only that specific time. So the people I wanted to draw here is like, typically what I would experience on a day drawing in public. So it's nice to see,
Thank
how
you.
other people add movement in this one too.
It's my picture.
Here with
Hey,
Nice.
look.
Awesome. Nice.
Very
nice.
Nice.
very good.
Lots of windows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots
I
of-
got a little carried away.
Yeah.
Very nice. Who else?
Yeah, it becomes muscle memory after a while, just doing windows.
It does. Yeah. That's why I also tend to save those more towards the end, because it's more mindless work.
Jamie.
Like window.
It looks
You have a blur
great.
filter.
I'm going to show mine in the meantime if someone else.
Oh,
Ah,
awesome.
awesome.
It's
Nice.
Very nice.
Really
Nice.
nice.
Nice. Yeah.
I love it.
Hannah, you
Yeah.
had the advantage of being there, right?
Yes,
Oh yeah.
I was here in this specific part. I was in March. I had the
Uh-huh.
opportunity to visit for the first time this area, so it was really nice. But I didn't have enough time to do a long sketch,
Yeah.
so this was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Janet. Okay, let's go with Janet.
Oh, really
Nice.
nice.
Look
Cool,
at
cool.
that.
Yeah.
That is
I
cool.
like how the windows are drawn in this one too. It's kind of it fades out more and more out you go. So it's you kind of keep the concentration more towards the center.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's right.
Great job.
Is that an umbrella too?
Well, I was trying to decide between an umbrella or some kind of different kind of hat instead of a ballpark, and it didn't work out. So it maybe end up being an umbrella.
It could be a
It's just
sombrero
that-
as well.
That's right, yeah.
What was that?
It could be a sombrero.
Yeah, yes, or a Chinese hat or something.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Nice.
If someone else wants to show their sketch, can show it, and I can spotlight. If not, Karen, sorry. Yes.
Oh, awesome.
All right, Karen.
Nice.
Very nice.
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 Very good. Thank you. And now we can take a group picture.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So everybody's showing their sketch.
Okay, but yes. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Nice. Thank you.
Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for showing your work. I love this. Thank you,
Well,
Wes.
thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I'm so
That
glad
was really good.
yes, and that you had some time for our chapter. Thank you very much. We know that you are very busy.
Yeah, no, it's really like my pleasure to have you guys reach out, and I'm really honored to be a featured guest for this session. And I hope, I do travel around a lot, so I'm planning to stay more domestically in the US come next year. So it'd be really fun to do like an in-person workshop, let's say, I don't know, come next year or afterwards. Yeah, because there's one thing to do something from a photo, and then I think it's just so much more exciting and engaging to do it, in real life. So
Absolutely.
hopefully we can reconnect at a later time for that.
Definitely.
Sounds
yes.
great. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Brian. You did
Thank
really
you.
well too.
Thank
to be able
you.
to be able to speak and draw at the same time is quite a skill.
You're amazing.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
Yes,
yes.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Usually
Excellent
I'm used
demo.
to doing it in person, because there's always people, I'm sure you guys have experienced as well. There's always like an ongoer or somebody looking over your shoulder, be like, wow, that's amazing. Sometimes the person can only come up for a photo or video. Sometimes they get in a conversation, or they ask like, oh, how do you do this? So I think I've been able to develop that instructing practice a lot, like at least this year. But to do it on Zoom is like, this was like kind of like a learning process for myself, but I'm happy I was able to get the message across and convey.
Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah,
Very good. Yes.
thank you.
And don't forget to look on YouTube because Hannah will post the meeting and you can see it on there and send people there if you like.
Yeah.
I'm sure people will subscribe to your Instagram and everything from there. So
Mhm.
I've been enjoying your Instagram. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you very much. Bryan, thank you very much. And thank you for taking some time from your grandparents and all your traveling. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, likewise here. Thank you guys for joining this evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
Good
Brian.
night, everyone.
Night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Bye.